What's up, everybody? Welcome to Franchise Advice. I'm your host, Nick Powills, publisher of 1851franchise.com. So, what started this conversation with me and you is I started looking at franchise opportunities and I Googled it. I Googled franchise opportunity to see if I have no idea where to even start as a franchise buyer, what am I going to be hit in the face with? And then numbers were crazy. It's like 500 million responses are generated when you search for franchise opportunities. And to you, a franchise buyer, if you are watching this video, you're watching it because you thought, well, I'm interested in owning a franchise. I don't know where to begin. And so I want to advise you in this video a pathway. I want to provide you this pathway for what I would do if I'm in your shoes looking at buying a franchise. Now, truth be told, I have never bought a franchise as a franchisee. I've been close. I've gone through the process of looking at what opportunities exist, but I haven't pulled the trigger. And so I'm going to guide you through my pathway on what I would do. And then I'll tell you what I think you should do as well. And be sure to subscribe to videos to get more information on the 1851 franchise YouTube channel. And feel free to use comments or message us if you need more advice on how to navigate this thing. So let's start off with what is franchising. When you buy a franchise as a franchisee, you're basically licensing the right to use their brand, the brand that was created by the franchisor, in exchange for a fee, in exchange for royalty, in exchange for technology fees or marketing fees. And so you're going to pay a fee, a franchise fee, that says now you have reserved the right, if you qualified, to buy this franchise and open up in the market that you've chosen. And typically the franchise brand is going to say, in exchange for this amount of money, you now have this protected territory where you can now operate this business. And then you obviously have to go through the pathway of how do you go from signing to opening, which we'll continue to dive into. So this fee on the front end should be, or it was designed for two things. One was exchange of cash, to say, I'm going to pay this fee, whether it's $10,000 or $30,000 or $100,000. I'm going to pay this fee to the franchise brand in exchange for the rights to operate the business. And the franchisor, the reason this number continued to climb was because the franchisor needed these funds to now go to support you and get you out open and operating and hopefully successful, because the franchisor makes the bulk of their money from royalty, or they should. And so these fees are designed for those two areas. Now, what has changed over the last, say, 10 years or so is franchisors want to find you. They want to find qualified and ready to buy human beings that say, yes, I'm interested in buying a franchise. And so because they're trying to get in front of you, they are using various mechanisms to find you. And ultimately, again, 500 million responses for franchise opportunities means there's so many things out there that it's really, 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 really challenging for a franchisor to break through to you, who could be a candidate for the brand that they're trying to buy. And so this complexity has changed, that now the franchisor says, okay, what are my areas of opportunity to get in front of you? And so they could buy an ad on what a traditional franchise portal would be called. You might find this as a Franchise Gator or Franchise Direct, where you land on these websites. You've searched for franchise opportunities, you land on these websites, and these websites say, okay, here's what exists in franchising. Now, the caveat, and a very important part of your process of buying a franchise, is these are ad sites. So the franchisor would have to buy an ad. And so you might take a brand like a McDonald's, we'll go very extreme. McDonald's isn't going to buy ads on these. McDonald's already has complete brand awareness and demand for their franchise, so they don't need to buy these portal ads. So you might click on burger franchise and not see a McDonald's on there. So the point is, that doesn't mean they're not a franchise. It just means they're not buying on this portal. The next place that franchisors have really dove into is the franchise broker or franchise consultant or franchise coach networks. And so these are networks of sales individuals. Typically, they own their own business who have set up these brokerages where basically they're going to guide you to the opportunity that makes most sense. Now, there's a few important parts to this that you need to be aware of. One, there are fantastic coaches and consultants and franchise brokers out there. And when you get a tremendous one, they are going to guide you to the opportunity that makes sense. Now, it goes back to the same franchise portal statement. Majority of the times, they are going to have a set amount of brands that they're going to push to you because that's in their inventory. It's much like a real estate agent has their inventory, and you may come to the table and say, hey, but I found this house over here that I want to see. Well, you're perfectly justified in doing that. And if the coach or consultant is really your coach or consultant, they're going to say, okay, let's vet out that opportunity, whether it's in my network or not. Now, in exchange for this work that the franchise coach or consultant does, there's a fee that is paid by the franchisor, which typically aligns with the franchise fee. So let's say the franchise fee is $30,000. You've come to the table and you've decided this is the brand you want to buy, and you're going to pay this $30,000 franchise fee. That check gets written. It goes over to the franchisor, and typically the franchisor says, look, for this consultant or coach helping guide you to us, we're going to pay them a portion of this or all of it back to the consultant in exchange for this introduction. It's not wrong by any means. The reality is they're in business, you're in business, the franchisor is in business. It's just important for you to understand that there is going to be fees paid in exchange for making that deal happen. Same with a real estate agent, same when buying a car, and same with anything that has some sort of sales structure behind it. There's a brokerage fee or a royalty or something associated in exchange for guiding you to that right opportunity. So you have portals, you have franchise brokers, and now you have category. And so let's say you love Nick's Burgers, and you go to Nick's Burgers and you're like, man, I've always dreamt about owning a restaurant. I do love Nick's Burgers. Can I open it in my marketplace? And again, it goes back to, is this territory protected and is there availability? And this is where supply and demand plays into what opportunities can potentially exist for you, the franchisee, in the marketplace. And so sometimes you may call that franchise brand or fill out the form on their website and say, yes, I'm interested in owning Nick's Burgers. Nick's Burgers is going to say, unfortunately, candidate, we don't have any territory availability. And what that means is someone else, a franchise owner, has bought that space, has reserved that marketplace, and is using that as a holding zone for how they're going to scale their business. This is where you hear supply and demand, that over time, it should deteriorate for the franchisor because they're growing. And if they're growing, that means territory availability is declining. And so for you, now you've came to the table and said, I want Nick's Burgers. Nick's Burgers is no longer available. So now you have a few different options. Nick's Burgers might say, hey, I know you're in Chicago, but have you thought about going to Peoria? We really want to develop in Peoria. You're like, nah. What about Milwaukee? Nah. All right. So now you go back to the drawing board and you say, but I'm interested in burgers. So now this is what my advice is. You go back on the web and you search for burger franchises. Now, be aware, including 1851, there's going to be brands that are paying for positioning. And so you might find Scott's Burgers. And Scott's Burgers sounds interesting. They've been advertised to you. It's not wrong. It's just they're paying money to get positioned in front of you. And so now you've got to do your due diligence. And you got to say, okay, how am I going to align what I want to accomplish out of owning a franchise based to what is available? And so this is where the key ingredients come into it. And this comes from us at 1851 Franchise, pulling hundreds and hundreds of franchisees and saying, let's talk about your buyer journey. Let's talk about what tripped you up in the buying process, what could have made you say no, and what made you say yes. And so for you, here are the ingredients that I think are very important to you discovering what franchise makes most sense for you. One, how much can you afford? It has to start from a financial decision standpoint, because most likely you're going to be leaving a career, transitioning from a career into owning a franchise. And this is a fairly big decision because go back to this franchise fee that you paid, this $30,000, you're buying a brand that is a franchise. So if you come to the table and say, I don't really like the color red, can't do much about it. You're buying the business is in a box, the box is operated, and you have to follow that system to equal the success that you're trying to gain out of this. So at the forefront, one, if you've decided that franchising makes sense for you, make sure that you're looking at a brand that you're like, yes, this makes sense for me. And then secondly, the financial component is very, very, very important. Now, there's a few pieces of advice that it comes to this financial number. Now, one, there's the SBA. If you Google SBA, and SBA and franchising, you'll see content about how you can leverage an SBA loan. You might have a relationship with your local bank. You can leverage loans there. And so if the franchise investment is $500,000, that doesn't mean you necessarily need $500,000 today. You might need 20% of it or 40% of it, depending on your credit and strength of your portfolio. But to put down, and then you can invest the rest into it. But there are some pieces that I want to disclose as it comes to thinking through how to buy that franchise. So $500,000, similar to buying a home, like you don't typically come and say, I'm going to just pay cash. Most people don't. They finance it. They have a mortgage. Same with owning a business. So now you're trying to figure out what you can afford. My recommendation is if you are trying to build wealth for you and your family, make sure that whatever business you're looking at, you're not just going to be able to afford one, you're going to be able to afford three. And that doesn't mean you sign an agreement for 3 deals on day one. It's just that when you're looking at how much cash you have to invest in a business, you're looking at it in a way of how can I buy 3 of these so that once I get the first one open, I can scale. There's 2 other components that I think are important on the cash standpoint. One is operating capital. It is going to be very stressful for you to own a franchise because you've transitioned a career, you've bought into a franchise business, and now you're a business operator. And so you want cash for rainy days on the sidelines so you don't get overwhelmed, stressed, or discouraged as a part of this process of building up a business. There is very, 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 very few opportunities where you get rich on day one. It's a slow burn to build things up. The other thing, grand opening / marketing dollars. I was at a conference years ago and they had a panel, 3 franchisees, top 3 franchisees in the system, and they're up there. And the third guy on there had gone from really middle to bottom of the pack up to number 3. And the moderator said, hey, how did you get up here? And he said, look, I spent 10 cents of every dollar on marketing my business. Now, a franchisee was sitting next to me and he elbows me in the side. He goes, that guy's an idiot. I'm like, no, he's on stage. He invested money into marketing. He engineered what should be a return on investment. And he changed the projections of his business to go from middle to bottom of the pack to number 3. That's a big deal. And so think about marketing dollars. Now, most of the time, you'll see a number in the FDD, the franchise disclosure document that you're going to get as a part of your process that is going to associate a grand opening number. I look at that number and I increase it. I make sure I have the cash to invest in it so that I can quickly get up and operating so that I can get to the place of return on investment. Now, few things that are important to me if I'm looking at a franchise opportunity. I want to know at what point is my break even? And I don't mean break even as in I recouped my whole $500,000 from an investment standpoint. It's more so when does the cash stop bleeding and cash starts coming into my pocket so I can make decisions on how quickly do I pay off my investment or how do I scale my investment to speed up the process. And so you want to look at what is this return on investment moment where all of a sudden you're not bleeding cash anymore. You've neutralized it and you're making a little bit of money so that now you can make those key decisions. And so this is all on how you look at how much can I afford when it comes to buying a franchise. We're not even at the other stages, which next stage would be, well, what am I passionate about? There are businesses that make a lot of money, but you have to make sure that you're going to have enough passion, because passion is currency when it comes to operating a franchise. So is grit, so is hustle. And sometimes grit, hustle, passion can help you really out hustle or outperform competitors and what the standards are for that franchise brand. And so now when you look at those intangibles from an investment standpoint, you've now aligned your passions, what do you care about with your financials. And now when you're looking at the brands that could fit into that category, you're trying to align it with those two things. How much can I afford, and what am I excited about? And because you understand the noise in the marketplace of all these franchise brands that are trying to get in front of you, you are now in the driver's seat, because now you get to make the decision of who do you want to inquire to. And so from an inquiry standpoint, you've now searched around the web. You went back to the web and you said, how do I find this right franchise? What is this right franchise opportunity for me? And so you've landed on 1, 2, 3 within the category. My recommendation is you look at 3, 4, 5 brands that fit. How much can I afford, and what am I passionate about? And now you lay them out on a tracker that says, what are the pros and cons of both? And then you go to their website and you read through the information. Now, within the website or within the brand's footprint, here are the key things that we're hearing from franchisees after they bought and what was their buying process. They say, I really want to know what the vision and the culture of the brand was. I want to know that the leadership had my back or is willing to have my back in the process. And so when you start thinking about support, because you are buying into a business, you're shifting your career into franchise ownership, you want to see a brand that is going to support you and give you as much scaffolding as possible to set you up for the greatest chance of success. And oftentimes that comes from the leadership, and it comes from the passion, and it comes from the support model and mechanism that they've put in place. Next is ROI. How much does it cost to open up this business? How much can I make? Now, most franchise brands today are disclosing how much you can make in item 19, but I want to provide a few pieces of insights on there that I think are going to be important for you determining, all right, what's the story in between these numbers? It's called average unit volume. Average unit volume means, AUV, means how much does the average unit make? And typically it's a gross revenue, meaning the top line dollars, not how much you're going to make at the bottom, top line dollars. And now you got to look through a few things. One is, what does units do in their first year of operations? That will help set your expectations. What do they do in 3 years of operations? So you look at the longevity of how long did it take to get to those volumes. That will start defining the story on how much you can make off of your initial investment. And again, I go back all the way to the starting point of advice. Can you open up 3 of these? Can you afford to open up 3 of these so you can start seeing the multiples? Now, we'll talk a lot more about this as time goes on, and you can find more information on 1851franchise.com. However, I think it's very important, if you're buying a business, my advice is don't buy into it thinking you're going to be average. Buy into it if you're confident you're going to be number one, right? And so it's all in that mindset of what is your approach to buying this business, and what is your mindset going to be about how do I perform? So if you're looking at it and saying, well, here's what the bottom franchises do, I don't know that that's going to be the right franchise brand for you, because if you're already looking at the bottom and thinking about worst case scenario, that's a tough mindset to jump into this business with. So you want to look at how much does it cost to get in? How much can I make? And again, going back to the initial investment standpoint, can I open up 3 of these? Maybe not on day one, but what would it look like to scale this business? So it aligns with what the wealth building that you want to accomplish from a business owner standpoint is. Now you look at, can I open in the market that I want to open in? Very, very important. You're going to dive into the point of differentiation on the product. Has the franchisor set up a model? Because you're going to pay a royalty. A percentage of every dollar is going to go back to the franchisor in exchange for the systems and processes and models that they've put together. You're buying into this. And so you're going to look at the point of differentiation in the product, and have they set up a model for how you can market when you open up your business to now hopefully hit that scale that you're trying to get to. And most importantly is the validation. when you call existing franchisees and you say, would you do this again? You want to hear absolutely. There was a brand that I did deep dive research into, the due diligence. I went through all of these processes. What can I afford? What does the support look like? What does the territory look like? And I got to the due diligence and I asked the question, would you do it again? And I heard hesitation and pause. And then after hesitation and pause, I heard feedback on what they don't like about the process. And so it's very interesting to hear those that have gone through the process now validate whether they would do this again. Now, there is a secret to validation that is super, super important to the process. And that is if existing franchisees, people that have already bought in, are continuing to scale and swallow up more territory, then they know how much money they can make with this. They know what their expectations were and how it aligns with how they went about the process of buying it. They are aligned with what they're trying to get to from an outcome standpoint. And so if existing franchisees are growing or buying existing locations, that is a good indicator that this is a brand that you may want to buy into. Now, after you've figured out how much money, you figured out the category, now you inquire. This is important for you to know. You as a lead have now been entered into the franchisor system. So I, Nick, have received you as my lead. You've said, I'm interested in learning more, and now I get this. And I'm typically going to respond back and say, okay, when can we schedule a call to discuss this? My advice is two things on here. One, if you're not ready to have that conversation, don't fill out the form yet. Stay a ghost. Like, do your homework around the web. Oftentimes, you can also download a brochure or some sort of information passively so that you don't have to get involved in that conversation. Because at this point, if you filled out that form and said, I'm ready to have a conversation with you, and you don't pick up the phone or you don't respond to emails, well, that kind of shows like maybe this isn't the right fit back to the franchisor. And it's got to be a two-way street. Same with applying for a job. If you apply for a job, you're like, yes, I would like to talk to this business. And this business goes, yes, we would like to talk to you. And you're like, I'm not going to reply. It just sets the tone the wrong way. So be aware of this as a part of your process, that once you fill out that form, they are excited to have a conversation with you. And now they need to educate you on, can you actually afford this? Can you open in the territory that you want to open in? And do we seem aligned from can we pass the beer test to make sure that you can fit into the process? Now, what is the expected timeline? You filled out this form. You've now had this conversation. I like to say it's a 90-day process from initial conversation to close. And then depending on what type of business sector you're buying into, education could take longer, restaurant could take longer, service brand could go faster. Fitness might go a little bit quicker depending on real estate selection. And so it all depends on what type of brand that you're buying into and what the expected timeline is. But typically I would say 90 days should be the run rate of, I've decided I want to buy a franchise. I've inquired. Now let me go do my homework and my due diligence on it. Now throughout these 90 days, my recommendation is read as much as you can about the business, connect with people on LinkedIn, talk with franchise owners who are associated with it. Maybe talk with a consultant or a coach. Say, what do you think about this opportunity? And do your homework on this, because this is a big decision. Can you get out of it? Totally, but you're about to invest your life savings into a business that you have little to no control over, for hopefully the upside that you've picked a business that you're able to scale and build wealth for you and your family. And so I've laid this all out. I'm at almost 25 minutes right now. And this is designed to give you the insights, the thought process on where you should go from here. So again, key takeaways. How much can I afford to invest into a business? This will start building what categories you can buy into. If you can afford over $1 million for you, or a swim school franchise makes sense for you. If you can afford under $100,000, maybe you're looking at something in the home service sector, like pool service, and you're looking what could fit in there. If you're somewhere in the middle, then you have a little bit more wiggle room. And after how much I can afford, I say do it for 3 units. Start doing your homework on things that you're passionate about. Talk with your family about what could we be excited to work on together. And then you get into the due diligence phase of figuring out, does this brand make sense for you or not? And do your homework as a ghost, because once you fill out that form and you've entered the system as a lead, understand like you're now engaged with this franchisor and they're excited to talk with you. So be aware of that from a process standpoint. Again, if you need more information on how to buy a franchise, make sure you go to 1851franchise.com. There's actually a university feature at the top navigation where you can click on it. There's a free masterclass on there. Make sure to reach out to us if you need more advice. Happy to have those conversations with you. But I wish you the best of luck on your journey. Continue to stay dialed into 1851franchise.com for more information on how you can not only buy a franchise, but scale a franchise and become successful as a franchisee. Wish you all the best. See ya.